we've got one more stack of paper drying, and I want you to see how wavy this is. And that is after keeping it pressed. I'm still working on how to keep it dry and flat. So these are what I'm going to call offcuts. It's getting closer to be like tissue paper. I'm going to call these offcuts. They are pieces that are so thin that they have a hole in the middle, and that has to do with my pulling technique. I'm still not perfected it, but these are so thin that, you know, we're getting there. The problem is when I tried to make thicker pieces that would hold up to wear and tear for the covers of books, I couldn't do it. And so that means that there's something wrong with my formula, and I'll have to go back to the drawing board. I'm keeping my scraps because there are things we can make with scraps. Wonder if you can see how smooth this is. A lot less of that orange peel effect. And again, this is an offcut, but no two pieces are the same. It's endlessly fascinating. So I thought, since we're kind of tying up some bonus for Junk Journal July, I thought that this color paper, this icy color, it looks ice blue to me, but you guys can't see it as well as I can. I can tell when I review the footage. But I thought brown torn paper with a stencil on it really looked nice against this icy blue. So I'll be fooling around with ephemera made with scraps. And then I only have 4 nice pieces to write on. Because when I just sorted my paper before and was looking for nice pieces, I wanted some that would be good for handwriting. And what ended up happening is I ended up using the nice pieces for something I'll show you in a second. So I only ended up with 2 or 3 nice pieces, unfortunately. But I have a whole bunch sitting in the drying cabinet. Now, sometimes when the paper pulp doesn't lay down, when you're flipping it off the decal, it doesn't lay down as nice, but you'll get these really nice folds that will compress down in the drying process. So I actually love this. All right, and then now, what have I done? You know, you're like, well, can we write on it? Yes, we can write on it. Can we do this? Can we do that? So here's, I wanted to take advantage of these ripples that happen when it doesn't land flat. Plus, all these little grid squares, that's a stencil. That's just basically a wonky open weave pattern, and I have to figure out how to use it properly. This is not the way to use it properly, because when I was compressing it to dry it, I lost a lot of the squares. But it does take distress ink very nicely. Actually, this isn't, I'm sorry. This is not distress ink. This is StazOn, I think. So it takes ink beautifully. And here's another example of how beautifully it takes ink. This is one of the pieces that had holes, and I thought, well, I'll laminate 2 pieces together, and the paper underneath will camouflage the hole in the paper on the top. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. So for this one, I said, let me intentionally laminate a light piece and let me color, and I worked on this thing with my blending brush for quite a while, but let me laminate light on dark and see what happens. And it's nice, but regular PVA white glue is not good for laminating. I think what I'm going to have to do is price out some dry glue and see if dry glue will work better. So why did I use my good writing paper? Well, I made some envelopes. Now, this is a mistake, so we're going to set this aside. I figured out that I could make, out of 2 sheets of paper, I could make 2 envelopes and 2 little note, this would be the folded in half, maybe write thank you on the front, fold it in half, write a very brief note as a thank you note. So unfortunately, I used my good writing paper for that, but I can make more, right? I can make more. So this is, just what you're expected to be. It's just an envelope made out of handmade paper. So I love these and I'm happy with them. I might make up maybe 5 in a bundle and sell them as thank you notes or what have you. Now this one I messed up, and you can see I've already trimmed off the top edge. The thing about making an envelope out of handmade paper is we don't have a straight edge to save our life on any. Here's one of the nicer pieces right here. We don't have a straight edge to save our life, do we? I could just chop. I could score a line, get my scissors, chop it, all 4 sides, square it up, and it's good, right? But even on this one where I did have to square it up, and I used my metal ruler and I tore it. Do you like this edge as much as this edge, for example, that was not torn? I don't. I like the raw edges. So, in order to make an envelope, you have to have a certain size and certain dimension. To make a square envelope, to make a square-ish envelope, clearly you need a square. If you want to make, for example, a rectangular envelope, then, well, this is a little troubling because of the ragged edges, which give it its charm. You have to decide for yourself, if you make paper, do I want it to be handmade and with all of its flaws, all of its character, all of its charm, or do I want it to be, precise, like machine-made paper? And honestly, I have to tell you, I'll take the character any day of the week. Let's see, what are we doing next? Okay, we've talked about it will take distress oxides and distress inks. Now, the last question you might want to know, we know we can write on it, we know we can color it with inks. What about the dyeing process? What about dyeing the paper after you've made it? Remember, anything you dye after you've made it is going to end up, with a curl, or it's going to be out of shape somehow. But I did take a small scrap and I sprayed re-inker that is cut with alcohol. So it's a faux alcohol ink. And then I put a mesh on top of it, one of those plastic craft meshes, and I got a small grid pattern. But I also got big splatters, relatively big for the spray bottle, which I love. I love that mottled look. I also did the same thing with blue ink. Now, this blue ink was made with children's markers. There's a whole thing in the paper dyeing episode about children's markers. So what had happened was I sprayed it, and everywhere that you see it's dark here and around here out is where the initial spray landed. Not so much in here. So I saw that and I went, oh, well, that's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. But I noticed that the edges were starting to absorb dye. And I thought, oh, let me just spray the outer edge a little bit, and then I'll weight it down with another mesh canvas. Well, when I did that, what happened was the excess from spraying around the edges pooled up and wicked underneath, and you can see it's very, it's very mottled here, whereas it's even here. This is the top where the dye landed, and then the only resist you got was from the edge. Which one of these do I like? I don't know. You know, this one got some blue overspray. I definitely like this one, this side better. So I'll have to put this in my master reference journal with some notes, what happened, why it happened, and we'll keep experimenting with handmade paper. I would suggest, if you're looking for particular color combinations, let's say you want to try and recreate this blue, where the blue overspray hit over here. It was actually like this, where the blue overspray hit, and then you've got this light coffee color around the edge. Then in that instance, I would take a couple of sheets and I would intentionally try and recreate that and take notes and, you know, keep it in a master reference journal like I have. So we know all these mediums will work as expected. Ballpoint pens, gel pens, but I would say they have to be very fresh. If they're getting old, they may skip over the surface of your paper. Pencils, but they're much fainter, colored pencils I'm referring to. Distress inks and stamps work fine because that unsized paper will absorb all the moisture, but it doesn't bleed as we've tested so far. Sharpies did give us slightly fuzzy edges on the strokes of our letters, but there was no real way to predict when that was going to happen. The larger nibs, you know, the regular Sharpies that you write with, did not have as much issue as some of the smaller ones. I don't know if the formula is different depending on the size of the nib. I just don't know. So it's a caution. These are the mediums that gave us issues, and it's the same pretty much with every wet medium. What do I mean by that? Anything that's water-based. So PVA glues like school glue, Mod Podge, and those types glues. Watercolors, even the pencils, if you wet the pencils. I would not use a water brush. I would experiment with watercolors. You may come up with some interesting abstract patterns, but just be aware, don't paint a masterpiece your first time on handmade paper. Sprays. If the paper is sitting on bare metal, plastic, or glass, that water that's not absorbed into the paper is going to pool up wherever the lowest edge is or the lowest side, and you're going to get staining along that part. You may like that. You saw that in the spray dye example just prior to this. So it's up to you. What about popular paper treatment techniques? Well, we've tried momogami and we've tried one method of waxing. And let me just say about momogami, specifically the dollar store method, which is using lotion. If you're going to use lotion, make sure you can live with that scent for a very long time because it doesn't dissipate. As soon as you brush that paper or move it or what have you, that smell comes up, and it comes up pretty strong. What about surface waxing? Well, I used a very soft liming wax. You could use pickling wax, but it's the consistency of cream. It's very soft. And I very lightly treated the surface, and it brightened. Since it was liming wax, it was white, and it brightened up the base paper color, which is this sort of gray. It's sort of, to my eye, it looks like ice blue. To you guys, it either looks gray or white. I hear you waxing fans out there. I hear you. You're asking me, what about a hard wax like beeswax? Well, let's find out. Sitting on a too short piece of book page are a piece of handmade paper and then a sample or control piece of scrap copy paper. Both are plain white. And I just zoomed in to point out to you that the copy paper has bled. This is StaysOn ink that has in black that has been used for all the stamping on these two samples, and copy paper bleeds. I zoomed in to quickly show you that on both samples, the left-hand stain is vintage photo. The center stain is walnut stain. And again, StaysOn jet black has been used for all the stamping. The reason I chose these three inks is that the first two are probably the most familiar by visibility and by use to my audience. Now, let's find out what happened. On the upper left is a sampling of how little beeswax it takes to get this kind of treatment. You could count the little pellets up there if you wanted to. Next to that is a sample of the plain handmade paper. And then underneath, obviously, is our handmade paper sample. And then completing, going left clockwise, is the plain paper or the copy paper scrap. You can see they're sitting on book page. The copy paper is uniformly thinner than this particular piece of handmade paper, but not by much. And because it's uniform, it appears to be more translucent than the handmade paper. However, the handmade paper is still translucent. You can clearly see the text block beneath. Here's my parting shot. Here's all the things that we talked about making today, or examples of techniques that we talked about today. There's a ton more that you can do with handmade paper to be explored. That's a wrap. I have to literally get up off this couch from doing voiceover and go over and start pulling paper again, because the way this summer has gone in Michigan, I get 2 or 3 days, or maybe 4, of way too hot sunshine, and then it storms. And last night, the storm woke me up at exactly 4 o'clock in the morning and said, get out of bed, you've got to get yourself prepared to pull some more paper. Isn't it funny how Mother Nature provides the commentary? Never mind, I'm waxing poetic. God bless you. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you real soon.